I'm done. I quit. This happens every single time. I put out a video talking about some issues going on with a game or a studio, and then immediately following, things get worse, or at least from my perspective, better when it comes to BioWare. See, because after my video talking about EA, they went out and announced, without even telling me, by the way, that they were going to restructure BioWare. They're going to make it more lean, mean. They're going to make it more agile. Corporate speak for, we're going to gut the studio in hopes these guys don't lose us any more money. Gamers keep winning. All these game studios have been pumping out games that deliver no value to us whatsoever, are now staring at the brink of destruction. They're staring at the void, and it's staring back at them, and that void is their wallets, their bank accounts. But it's time for us to feel empathetic. Don't you dare celebrate, gamer. I see you. No. It's time to feel empathetic, or at least that's what 5 fans of Dragon Age the Veilguard, some games journalists, and a few game developers believe, because we should feel bad for the situation that they put themselves in. You know, there's a lot of people that are trying to find the smoking gun. They're trying to figure out what happened here, pointing fingers all around. How could this happen to BioWare? How could this happen to Dragon Age the Veilguard? This game was so successful for 2 days. Man. You know, some people are blaming the players for not buying the game. Other people are blaming the cultural climate of today's society. Other people are blaming economics, but I think that they're all looking in the wrong places. They're not thinking about it the way that they should, and I think it's time that we set them straight, because BioWare didn't just wind up in this position. It was led there. Dragon Age the Veilguard, while critically successful, was a commercial failure. Yet another lesson in that if critics like something, if we don't want it and we don't buy it, well, what they say doesn't really matter all that much. Now, as I mentioned in a previous video, EA ended up telling their investors that Dragon Age the Veilguard only engaged 1.5 million players since its launch, and they were expecting 3 million players and reportedly 10 million players by the end of the game's first year. Something that not a lot of people have taken notice of is the fact that they said engaged 1.5 million players. That's very specific language, meaning that it's not reflective of what Dragon Age the Veilguard's actual sales are. It's just how many people bought it, reviewed it, played it as a demo, or played it through EA's subscription service, meaning that the real sales for this game are likely far lower than the number that was announced. Which is absolutely devastating for a studio like BioWare, because from an executive perspective, they don't have any passive income. They don't have any live service games that are generating revenue for that studio. The only income that they have is from their game sales, and we're a ways off before they release their next game, which means not only has BioWare not made up the money for their decade-long development costs for Dragon Age the Veilguard, but they don't even have anything to soften the blow. So from EA's perspective, this studio is doing nothing other than costing them money, which makes sense as to why layoffs would soon follow the game's failure. Now, that all makes sense. You have to staunch the bleed, and you should probably fire the people that were responsible for making you bleed in the first place. I mean, that's a pretty common sense approach. However, well, common sense isn't so common in gaming anymore, and there are those who are pretty upset over this studio's layoffs. In an article from PC Gamer written by Harvey Randall titled "On a Pirate Ship, They Toss the Captain Overboard," Larian, head of publishing, tears into EA after BioWare layoffs waste institutional knowledge. A profit drop doesn't mean a closed shop. Harvey writes, so BioWare isn't going to be making a new Dragon Age game anytime soon, maybe ever, depending on how things go. After Dragon Age the Veilguard underperformed, much of its team, including senior members who had been making Dragon Age games for a while, were shuffled around or laid off. This isn't necessarily out of nowhere, as quite accurately called by a consultant and former BioWare vet, Mark Dara, almost prophetically, this marks the first time the studio has only had one major project to focus on. He rather optimistically stated that these devs would find their way to other EA studios and that the challenge would be involved in trying to get them back. Turns out, he was right, a lot of them are just gone entirely. Regardless of my thoughts on the game's writing, plenty of the staff now departing have made good stuff in the past. Trick Weeks, for instance, wrote frickin' Moradin in Mass Effect 2 and 3, as well as Iron Bull and Solus in Inquisition. 2 characters I like very much. The foibles of Veilguard haven't left me irate so much as a little despondent, confused, and wondering whether just scrapping decades of talent in a purge is the right move at all. That's a despondency that's shared by Michael Dowse, publishing director of Baldur's Gate 3, developer Larian Studios, who took to X in a series of posts last week to more or less tear into EA for letting go of so much institutional talent. He writes, is it possible not to lay off large portions of your development teams between or after projects? Critically, retaining that institutional knowledge is key for the next game. It's often used as an excuse to trim fat, and to an extent, I understand that under financial pressure, but Doesn't that just highlight how needless the aggressive efficiency of giant corporations is? Douse isn't necessarily throwing stones from a glass house here. Larian is a big old studio, true, but it's something of an anomaly in the games industry. Tencent has a minority, non-voting stake in the company, but otherwise, it's completely independent and free of shareholders. Baldur's Gate 3 very much seems like a product of a studio free from those expectations, being able to take its damn time. I'd understand if they were pumping out hit after hit. Perhaps you could argue it's working, but clearly the aggressive streamlining of layoffs aren't. It's nothing but cost cutting in the most brutal of sense. It's always the people lower down on the food chain that suffer, when it's clearly a strategy higher up the food chain that's causing the problem. Douse caps the post off with, on a pirate ship, they toss the captain overboard. In a second clarifying post, he adds, to make it absolutely clear, what I hate about the way layoffs are carried out is that they are done before decision makers know what to do with the studio, and not as a result of figuring out a direction. Yeah, and on a pirate ship, if the captain smelled even a hint of mutiny, they'd hang him, they'd maroon him on an island, or they'd drag them behind the ship.
You swore she'd go free! Don't dare impugn me on her, boy! I agreed she'd go free, but it was you who failed to specify when or where.
Generally, almost all times, I end up agreeing with Michael Douse on a variety of different issues because he understands the industry and the players in a way that very few do. However, here, I have to disagree with him. Look, institutional knowledge is important. You need veteran talent to maintain the creative vision of any long-standing franchise, to refine its mechanics, to push quality forward over time. Larian Studios is the perfect example of that. You can see the evolution from Divinity Original Sin to Baldur's Gate 3. They didn't just make another CRPG. They took everything that they had learned from their past games and built something legendary. But that's the difference. Larian grew their talent, and their talent grew with them. BioWare, they bled out long ago. Most of BioWare's best developers were already gone before or during the development of Anthem. The moment that EA forced them to go make a live service game instead of doing what they do best, that's when it all started. BioWare's decline didn't start today. It started the moment that EA lost the people who made the studio special in the first place. And that's EA's fault. He's not wrong in that. But where I disagree with Douse is that I don't think that there is any institutional knowledge that's worth keeping here in the first place. Because who exactly is BioWare today? The idea of institutional knowledge falls apart when the people that are still working on the games today aren't the same people that made them great in the first place. The studio is a ship of Theseus, the same name, but all of the parts have been replaced so many times that it's not the same BioWare anymore. Think about it for a second. Veilguard's game director, Corinne Bush, didn't come from RPGs, he came from The Sims. That tells you everything you need to know about the creative direction at BioWare today. And even if there are some veteran developers that are remaining, I mean, Corinne Bush, Trick Weeks, and a few others have been with BioWare and EA for many years, but who's to say they're still worth keeping? People love to romanticize institutional knowledge as if it's the only thing that matters is how long someone has actually worked on a franchise. But people change, their beliefs change, their motivations change, and over time, that knowledge can turn into a poison that destroys what made a game special in the first place. Dragon Age had a lot of issues. The combat was dry, the gameplay was repetitive, but most importantly, the narrative, the core of what makes a narrative-driven game actually work, was fundamentally flawed. And that's not just a random failure, that's the direct result of your institutional knowledge turning toxic. Because the writers at BioWare didn't write a story that resonated with people anymore, because I don't think they can write a story that will resonate with people anymore. Over time, they changed as people, and I think people forget that people change. They forgot how to connect with an audience. They wrote a mature-rated game with the softest, most sanitized character portrayals imaginable. They aimed it at an undefined, non-existent, young adult audience, populating it with a cast of millennial, maladjusted, socially awkward archetypes who felt more like reflections of their own personal social circles than actually compelling characters. And then on top of that, they forced in divisive, socially liberal gender themes, not because it made sense to the story, not because it was actually good for the game, but because they wanted to push their own worldview into the game. It added nothing to the game's quality and ultimately only took away from it. At a time where gaming is more divided than ever, they doubled down on their own ideological messaging instead of focusing on telling a damn good story. They believed that their perspectives, their experiences, and their beliefs mattered more than the needs of the audience or the financial survival of their own coworkers. And when a studio starts prioritizing personal agendas over player engagement, over financial stability, over creative integrity, there is only one outcome: failure. So why should we mourn the loss of that institutional knowledge? Why would you want to keep people around who actively killed the very studio that they're working for? If a studio's leadership and long-term developers become so disconnected from their audience, so lost in their own ideological echo chamber, then what value does that knowledge have anymore? None. Absolutely none. Not a single drop of value. I am so sick and tired of this narrative that's being peddled that firings and layoffs are immediately a bad thing in this industry. We have an industry that is running to the defense of people that are bad at their job, that are putting the livelihoods of their fellow coworkers at risk at every single given turn. You have to route that out. Simple as that. Done. End of conversation. Sure, EA has had their hand in this. I'm not going to pretend like they haven't. They are the ones that didn't hold on to the knowledge, to the talent that studio had for many years. They let those people go. They made decisions that made those people leave. But when it comes to this decision to fire the writing staff of Dragon Age the Veilguard and its leadership, no, this is common sense. This isn't heavy-handed. This isn't a quick decision. No, you recognized a problem and you got rid of it. Simple as that. And to be honest with you, they had to do this. They had to show the audience, they had to show the players, they had to show their investors that they still have value in BioWare, that they still value BioWare's reputation. And from my perspective, this actually gives me more faith in Mass Effect 5. Because a lot of people miss this. The director of Mass Effect 5 was already trying to distance themselves before Dragon Age the Veilguard even came out. I talked about this in a video way, way early on, but when people are asking about the writing, when people are asking about the themes, when people are asking about the art style, they said, no, we are two completely different teams. We have two completely different plans. We're about grit and realism, and that's what we want. That's what I want. And you know, the thing is, we're talking about firing that team from an executive perspective, or even just from an onlooker's perspective, given today's social political climate, given today's political climate, given the way that game received so much backlash, given how disconnected it was and the themes that it included, that writing team, that leadership likely wouldn't just lay their head down. No, they would feel emboldened. They push even harder in the next game because they would want to fight back against the perceived enemy that they have. That's exactly what they would do. And they would waste even more money. They'd probably have even more people lose their jobs, and it would sacrifice even more of the studio's reputation. That would be the end result. But they recognized that it was an issue, and they got rid of it. Simple as that. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, there's a lot of people that are upset over the firings, a lot of people that are upset over the layoffs. And the funny thing is that none of it actually has to do with Dragon Age the Veilguard. None of it actually has to do with the quality of the game or anything like that. It's the fact that you have folks that are out there that believed a multi-billion-dollar company was an ally. It had more to do. They look at this as an attack against their beliefs, as an attack against their identity, when it's just a company making a smart business decision. Why do people want multi-billion-dollar companies to be moral arbiters? It makes no sense to me. And they don't have any interest in being one in the first place. And people are starting to wake up to that now. I've come across a lot of comments from developers, journalists, and players lamenting at the supposed cultural impact that is lost with the exodus of Dragon Age the Veilguard's writing team, BioWare's writing team. One streamer, for example, dramatically claimed that Veilguard failed because it chose to represent. That's why it's being attacked. And now that the staff is gone, they don't think that BioWare has the right intentions anymore. But my question is, what intentions should a game studio have other than delivering a quality product? None. There shouldn't be anything else. Games are not meant to be your ally. They are not meant to fight for you. They are meant to entertain and make money. That's it. Some of BioWare's writers may have seen themselves as stewards of justice, pushing personal beliefs through their work, but marketing and executives, you are nothing more to them than a consumer to be manipulated and milked for money. And yet, people will defend garbage video games not because they're good, not because it respects the franchise or its legacy, but because it represents something they want to see in the world, regardless of its quality. There's this sense of defeat among certain groups, not because the game failed, but because the pendulum is swinging in the other direction. For years, certain beliefs have been pushed aggressively and across all media forms, gaming, movie, music, television, whatever it might be. And those who disagreed were told to shut up and take it, even if their concerns were about quality and not ideology. I've seen this firsthand. I know exactly how frustrating it can be to simply ask for a good game and receive nothing but hate and vitriol in response. I've seen Reddit threads dissecting my entire personality, applying beliefs to me that I don't even hold just because I dared to criticize a game. And now what? Those same people that have spent years calling other people bigots for criticizing a game's quality are learning firsthand that their opinions are not the popular ones. The gaslighting isn't working. It didn't work. Why? Because Dragon Age the Veilguard didn't fail because of its themes. It failed because it was a bad game. And what I don't understand is, why are people wanting to settle for bad representation when you could demand better? How is Tosh a good representation of anyone? Just like I wouldn't want the stereotype of every white guy being a villain in movies, television shows, and games, why would you want poorly written characters reinforcing negative stereotypes of the identities and communities that you seem to care about? Shouldn't the goal have been to actually have characters that resonate with people, characters people actually like? But instead of asking for better, people are instead choosing to blame the audience for rejecting a bad game. I found a Reddit post titled, "Chuds Ruined BioWare," which said, "Hope you assholes are happy for ruining the careers of many employees. If you didn't like it, all you had to do was ignore it and let the ones who do enjoy it be." But no, you had to review bomb and hate grift the game, and now BioWare is on its last legs. You all must feel so proud and are edging to Asmongold videos in celebration of EA gutting BioWare. And in that same thread, I found the perfect response. Chuds did not ruin BioWare. The anti-woke crowd tried attacking Baldur's Gate 3, but it was a solid game, and it's doing amazingly. The only people who ruined BioWare are EA and BioWare themselves. Giving the anti-woke crowd credit for this only emboldens them and makes them believe that their tantrums work. Yes, the anti-woke crowd is annoying, but at the end of the day, while you and many others love Veilguard, plenty of people did not, and for valid reasons. It's okay that you liked a game that wasn't a commercial success, but blaming that on the wrong people does no good. BioWare should be held accountable for their own failures. The funny thing is, players did exactly what the original poster asked. They didn't like the game, they didn't want to play the game, and as a result, they didn't buy it, and that's why Dragon Age the Veilguard failed. And the reply is completely right. Baldur's Gate 3 included almost all the exact same themes, if not even more flexibility in choice and expression, yet with what little backlash it had, none of it had any effect because it was a good game, and that's what really matters here. While I do think that social ideology definitely played a role in Dragon Age the Veilguard's failure, I don't view it as some culture war victory. It's a customer victory. It's proving that players aren't putting up with slop anymore. But there's another major reason as to why Dragon Age the Veilguard failed, and some people want to forget this. It's because it's not the game that we were supposed to get. Dragon Age the Veilguard was a game without identity. It started off as a live service game built to be the next multiplayer RPG because EA wanted to turn Dragon Age into another Destiny, but when the backlash for live service games hit the industry like a sledgehammer, they scrambled to turn it back into a single-player RPG, and when you have a project that's built for one thing and abruptly pivoted to something else, you have to ask yourself who's going to fix it. You need strong leadership. You need a creative director that understands how to bring everything together, who understands RPG mechanics, combat design, storytelling, and pacing. But BioWare didn't have that. Instead, they put the wrong people in charge, people who, rather than fixing a game's fundamental issues, chose to focus entirely on the story that they wanted to tell, on the message that they had to deliver. They ignored the gameplay, they ignored the mechanics, they ignored the world building and player choice. Unlike Baldur's Gate 3, that didn't do any of those things, they made sure all of those things were the most important thing in their design. Their message became the only thing that mattered. Notice something, that the designers, the environmental artists, the sound techs, the gameplay developers, these aren't the people that got fired. They were the ones that got repositioned because their failure wasn't in how the game looked or functioned. The failure was in the fact that none of that mattered to their leadership. None of the parts fit together, and the customers were delivered something that was an incohesive Frankenstein of a game where all of the effort went into bad writing and poor messaging. And that's why this was all inevitable. Because here's the thing, I don't care if a game includes themes that I personally disagree with, and I don't think a lot of people do either. I don't care if it explores politics, gender, religion, or whatever else a writer wants to tackle, as long as the game is fun and engaging, I'll play it. At the end of the day, I just want to enjoy a good game. That's all I've ever wanted. I think that's what most people want. But when a game's themes aren't woven naturally into its world, when they lack nuance, when they feel like a cudgel rather than a conversation, and the gameplay takes a backseat to all of that, well, I don't see that as an ideological attack. I see that just as a bad video game. I don't see these developers as some grand ideological enemy pushing an agenda. I just see them being shit at their jobs. That's what so many people fail to understand. It's not about representation, it's about execution. You can tackle any subject, any theme, and if it's done poorly, if it's forced, if it sacrifices storytelling and gameplay in favor of preaching, well, then it fails. Not because people are intolerant, not because people weren't ready for it, but because it was badly written and poorly implemented. I'm sick of these cultural battle lines being drawn every single time a game flops. I'm sick of developers and media drawing those lines. I'm sick of players and people defending these games and using inclusivity as a shield from criticism. A bad game is a bad game, period. That's it. There's no other reason behind it. No amount of social messaging, no amount of good intentions, no amount of defense from games journalists is going to change that, because players are done settling. They don't care about your message. They don't care about your characters. And they sure as the hell don't care about your employees if the game sucks. And Dragon Age the Veilguard, well, that game sucked. In one of my last streams, I ended up having a AAA developer reach out and talk to me for a little bit. And they told me that in all their years of experience, they've worked across the entire industry, whether it was Sony, whether it was Activision, all these big names. They said that never do you see people lose their job if they're actually good at their job. 12 years in the industry, they never saw a single person that was good at their job lose their job. They said anytime you see these layoffs, it is almost always people that are underqualified or bad at their job. That's it. They went on to then say that the people that are still at BioWare, the people that were working on Dragon Age the Veilguard that still have a job somehow, well, they knew exactly what was going on, what went wrong with Dragon Age, but they likely couldn't talk about it. They couldn't speak up. They had to couch their criticism in soft language, toxic positivity. And, you know, while ideology and social beliefs might have something to do with it, I'm sure there is an impact there for sure. Poor leadership is a plague to a lot of these companies. And that's likely exactly what EA was targeting here. Chuds didn't kill BioWare. BioWare killed BioWare. I'm hoping that with all the big failures we saw in 2024, that a lot of these studios and these publishers can see the markers for failure. They're recognizing them better and able to reposition and change their games appropriately to be successful in the coming years. You would have to, because there's just way too many instances, way too many examples of what players don't want and what players do want. And I'm hoping they're learning the lesson. I feel like a prophet, man. It's so crazy to be this far into the future now. I guess not really. It was only like, what, back in, when did this game come out? Like November or September or something like that? I put out a tweet right after all of the reviews went up, and I was like, there is no way. You guys are trying to protect this game. You gave it to reviewers early that you knew really liked it already. You kept it away from the people that you knew didn't like it, and then you wanted to protect its launch. Give it a positive light. Try to get more people to buy it. And I was like, there is no way this is going to work. I cannot believe that you guys are even doing this in the first place. And it didn't work. Maybe it did for some people. I actually feel really, really bad now that I think about it. And also, games journalists need to feel bad. Shame on you guys. For the people that were out there that were defending this game, standing in front of it, shielding it from criticism, shielding it from all the people saying that it wasn't going to be worth their money, you likely led some people to go buy that game, and they hated it. And they wasted their money because they went on your word, because they trusted you. Gross. Anyway. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did enjoy the video, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it to your friends, comment down below, join the Discord if you guys haven't. People need to join the Discord more. Maybe I need to put the link in the description or in the, well, it's in the description. I'll put it in the comment. Anyway, stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.
Family, 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 family.